say that.
I'm gonna teach you the crime, just don't pay. I'm gonna get that sucker, dirty mind.
Hold on, brother.
I'm gonna stay on your case till I put you away. I know you think that life's a bowl of cherries.
You've joined the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and tonight I've rented I'm Gonna Get You, Sucka. Watching it with me is Edward Carter from @Dotmund. Hi Ed, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. Now, this was a film that you seemed very passionate about when we spoke beforehand. How was rewatching it for you this time?
Oh, it's fantastic. It never stops being entertaining to me. It's an incredibly funny film, and it just never ever stops giving.
It's one of those films that I don't think got a very wide reception, certainly in the UK. I first became aware of it on a home video of Batman that I got. I'm not sure how my dad managed to get a copy of it quite soon after it came out, but this was one of the trailers. And as a 9 or 10-year-old watching this for the first time, I was more entertained by the trailer for this than I was for Batman. It's really just crazy parody, isn't it?
It is.
It's sort of going at the blaxploitation films of the 70s. This didn't come out till 1988. The warning we should give is it's from the director of White Chicks. It says all you need to know, but this is a very different film. What sort of contemporary films do you think this compares to?
I don't know if I would really pick a contemporary film that this film is like. It most reminds me of its two great 80s counterparts in the spoof genre, Naked Gun and Airplane. And I think actually it's most like Airplane. Yeah. In terms of modern films, there's not a lot like it. I can't think of another film that I go back to as often as I do with I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker, which is a film that I'll watch several times a year.
In this film, it's got a very, as it opens, and this is where it probably reminds me more of The Naked Gun. It opens to any ghetto USA, which immediately makes you think that, right, this is taking the piss. But we have the police, blues and twos, tearing it down to a dead body. A weathered old detective turns up on the scene, and the cause of death is OG.
Yeah.
Now, an overdose of gold chains.
Just too many gold chains. And I love the implication there that it's played in a very quiet way, as if, well, yeah, it's just another one of these OGs. You already, it's conjuring images in your mind about this the kind of place that any ghetto USA is, where this sort of thing is run of the mill, because the state of the man with a hubcap round his neck and gold chains like a suit of chainmail armor is a sight to behold. I mean, it's something that, in a way, there are so many moments in this film that I wish I could watch with fresh eyes, because the original impact of that must have been fantastic on me, and it's been weathered away.
I mean, it's very sort of coming back to it now. You almost see the scene with the cop and the OG is like it's something out of The Wire, or it's like, oh, another youngster lost to this scourge of the streets. Obviously, the link is it's not drugs, it's these ludicrous gold chains that make Mr. T look like a newcomer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is very well acted. It's beautifully well judged as a spoof. It's one of those things that, like Airplane, it is both a spoof in that it has to be played in a certain way and given a certain amount of believability, but at the same time it knows what it is, and it doesn't mind pantomiming things up to just ratchet and wring every last laugh out of it every scene.
Well, the next scene, because this dead body is described as John Doe, the next scene is the funeral. Now, it's very well attended. The priest is giving a nice speech, and it's only when he says the name of the guy who's died when 95% of the congregation up sticks and head off, realizing they're at the wrong funeral.
Yeah, they thought that it was Lester Wilson's funeral
Yeah.
rather than Junebug Spade. The turn of the Reverend in this film is one of the highlights of the whole thing for me. He is just fantastic. Yeah, I mean, his whole "you've got to prepare to die" speech is just a
Yeah.
joy. And, the idea that the gold chains that they took from his body was what paid for that beautiful, uplifting sermon that you've got to prepare to die. Fantastic. I watched the film that Keenan Ivory Wayans wrote the year before to provide the seed capital for this film, which is called Hollywood Shuffle. And the man who plays the Reverend is the proprietor of a hot dog joint in that. There are a few people from Hollywood Shuffle, which it is a cult film of its own, of its own on its own 2 feet, on its own basis, is accepted as a cult film. It was recommended to me by my Netflix, whereas I saw on Twitter that I'm Going to Get You, Sucker got you the Fritzl film recommended. I got recommended Hollywood Shuffle.
I'm not sure what it says about my Netflix history because, quite frankly, the fact that it recommended I'm not sure if I assume a documentary about Joseph Fritzl and also Paul Blart Mall Cop 2.
Well, Paul Blart Mall Cop is never far away.
It's obviously thinks I'm some kind of masochist. Maybe
so.
Yeah, it's I suppose that's Netflix for you. But I didn't even realise this was on Netflix until you mentioned it on sort of in the prep for this, because I thought I'd have to dig it out from somewhere.
Yeah, I found it on Netflix maybe, I don't know, beginning of the year or the end of last year. What a find! What a day that was!
Bringing back your youth.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, after the funeral, it's Junebug's mum and his ex-partner who, they retreat to the house and sort of moan about how not many people bother to turn up to the funeral, and it's when the Mr. Biggs sort of goons turn up, and it's Damon Wayans
Damon Wayans. I mean, is a brilliant actor, as we all know, and it looks so uncannily like his son that you do wonder whether witchcraft may have been involved. I love Willie and Lenny, the two Mr. Big's hoods in this film. They are magnificently incompetent, terribly, terribly earnest in what they're trying to achieve. And they do get chucked down every staircase that they encounter.
I mean, for a film like this, that because they go there to collect money that Junebug owed, and the mum turns out to be a sort of secret, almost I wouldn't say ninja, but certainly kicks their ass. And it's probably the only joke that wouldn't even say gets overplayed. It only happens, I think, 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, you don't mess with mama.
No. And she says you can leave by the window or you can take the stairs. And the joke being that you'll always choose the stairs, but it cuts to them rolling down, having been thrown. It's landing at the bottom just as the prodigal son returns home from army service.
10 years or whatever, I think they say in the film. 10 years away in the army. What a return. Again, brilliantly acted. I have so much respect and time for all of the actors in this film. I think they all do a brilliant job. And Keenan Ivory Wayans, I think, considering his output afterwards and the Wayans family's output afterwards, he's revelatory in this film. You sort of maybe wonder what happened afterwards.
I mean, it's quite the cast that they've assembled. We don't meet a lot of the bigger names until a bit later on. But he turns up, and even little jokes, that most people can relate to. You go back to a parent's after a long time, and she'll say, "Oh, I've kept your room exactly as you left it." And of course,
Yeah.
he walks in and there's plates of food and clothes on the floor and flies buzzing
Yeah,
around.
it's a right mess. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
again,
time capsule.
yeah. I don't ever recall having seen that joke before. And it feels like a joke that should be as old as the sun. Um,
Yeah,
but I mean, that is the only example of it I've ever seen. So maybe this film just trapped something from the shared consciousness.
this is it. And I guess in a lot of films or TV shows where, you know, part of the joke or the nostalgia is where you see the room as you left it, because that's the ideal, you know, it's tidy and
Yeah.
pristine. And the fact that it's been left festering for that long, despite everything.
Yeah, Mama Spade is seriously badass.
And as they talk about how Junebug sort of descended into his addiction to gold chains, and Jack says, "Oh no,
Not gold.
not gold."
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, what a brilliant, brilliant example of the way that they sort of play with the whole genre of the film. They stretch it in and play it as straight as they can do, and at the end they give it a really big tweak and a twist and a pantomime. There is no stone unturned in this film to get a laugh.
And even little parts, because
Absolutely, yes.
as the goons go back to Mr. Big, who is a shadowy character. Literally, he's in the shadows. We don't see him because they've suggested that to pay off Junebug's debt, they'll take his wife
Yeah,
and earn the money from her. And again, another joke is that Mr. Big, in a film by black actors and directors and writers, is an old or middle-aged white guy.
yeah. He is pretty much the only white character in the film, I think. And there he is at the hub of everything. You know, that's whitey
Yeah.
for you.
It's almost like a backwards Blazing Saddles in that way.
Yeah,
I mean, this is where, as part of the plan to find out what happened, they don't want Junebug's death to be treated as some kind of just random case of another OG.
no.
Jack decides that he needs to find out. He's going to ask some questions. So, of course, you know, in a tight-knit community where everyone supposedly knows each other, of course you want to go to somewhere where people will be hanging out. And there's a local competition for the youths. It's
Yes.
not like table tennis or anything that you'd have at a youth club down my way. This is a slightly different discipline.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's like the juvenile delinquency Olympics, isn't it? I've rewatched the film. I rewatched the film this afternoon to prepare for watching it, and the editing of that has always delighted me. It's you start with the police officer shooting his gun in the air like a starting pistol, and then putting it down to 90 degrees to shoot at the youth who are running away with televisions. And that then cuts straight to the who can, you know, how fast can you strip a car down to its shell competition, which I believe has Sean Wayans and Marlon Wayans, I believe, are both members of that crew.
Oh, really? Okay.
Early film appearances as teenagers. But I love that. And when the referee checks the stopwatch and mouths "fuck," it's one of the best moments of that film. It's a film of moments.
And even the banners at the top, it's the first annual youth gang competition. The guys with the TV being chased by dogs.
Yeah.
You know, it's everything sort of, and even, you know, slightly ahead of the time. I guess this was 98, so you had
88.
LA 88. Sorry, yeah, it was the LA race riots of 92.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of this was jokes about how the police were, you know,
Yeah.
well, let's put it mildly, overhanded.
Well, I think
But
like any spoof, it makes a number of points that the films that they're spoofing made, and I think that this film does make a number of sort of really killer points about race relations, albeit with a laugh and a joke.
and my favourite part of this scene was the news anchor
Oh
afterwards
yes,
interviewing. I mean, you've got this news anchor who, is a sort of fairly young black guy, looking very smart in his TV news network, like something out of Anchorman. He's interviewing John Slade, who's the sort of local hero.
yeah.
Really, he did a lot to catch some villains in the past, and basically, he's almost sounding like a precursor to Carlton out
He
of
is
the Fresh Prince,
absolutely, he is absolutely Carlton Banks. I absolutely,
and nails it as the sort of upper middle class white guy.
yeah. He loves Springsteen, and he grew up where in his neighbourhood all the other kids were white. He was the only black kid, and he grew up loving Springsteen. What a turn that is.
And this is one of those things where, initially you kind of think, oh, he must be, he's a local news anchor covering the local event, and yet he turns out to be, I suppose this would be their version of him being a token character. They've put him there maybe because he's black. He's almost as white as anyone he could be working with.
Well, I mean, yeah, he's a fascinating character, and obviously he's Carlton Banks. Again, it taps into something that was happening in America at that time. So it's a bit of a time capsule, really.
Yeah, and this is part of Keenan Wayans doing. He was very instrumental in Living Colour, wasn't he? And,
Yeah, he was the producer.
He did a lot of the Arsenio Hall show.
Yeah, he's a big hitter.
He is, and the fact that he was able to put this together, at a time when African American culture, I suppose, on US telly was becoming more prominent, and being able to, it sounds awful now, but almost being able to get away with putting this on the screen. It's I think you can imagine it being quite provocative to certain people.
It was the point. That was the whole point of blaxploitation. Really, was that it was black people who have been denied the chance to be that play the heroes in all of the Hollywood films, finally being given the chance to do it, and that only happened in the early 1970s. So, in a way, this film acts as like a snapshot of how far they'd come. But also, it doesn't shy away from saying, "Well, this is how far we still have to go." It's it's a deep film, as well as being a shit your pants funny film, and that I admire all of that in less than 90 minutes. Again, it's short, which is something that people think when you say, "Oh, what was the film like?" and you go, "Well, it was short," they think that that's an insult, but it really isn't. I don't think.
Yeah. Not all films have to be 3.5-hour epics.
No, 90 minutes, and that's your lot. Yeah. I walk out of films after 90 minutes now, so you better have finished.
Set the watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
After this, Jack and John Slade have a bit of a chat, because it turns out that John was quite the character in his younger days and was in love really with Jack's mum. And
yeah, absolutely. They were pretty.
They put the fact that he was worried that he said, "Oh, I'm not your daddy, am I?"
Yeah.
He's obviously been confronted with that.
I think that this is the key scene in the film. It's just brilliant. Bernie Casey plays that character of the sort of black militant neighborhood hero so beautifully well, and he's got compassion, but he's got street smarts. He speaks in jive, and he doesn't want to hear no bullshit about you coming around here. There's a running joke in the film where when someone comes up to somebody else and their attention isn't necessarily warranted or wanted, that they say, you ain't selling no way products, are you? And
Yeah.
that, out of all of the times that running gag is delivered, that is the finest. When he walks up to John Slade and says, "Can we have a word?" He says, "You ain't selling no A products, are you?" God, honestly, I just adore it. It's so funny.
Yeah.
And Bernie Casey died last year, and it was one
Yeah.
of those things I saw. Oh, a headline: Bernie Casey dies, but I never really thought of him as Bernie Casey. If they'd said John Slade had died, I would have been at the funeral, I think.
You'd make sure you're at the right one, though.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Yeah.
Well, they have a chat, and Jack tries to persuade John to use his community relations to help him find out what happened to his brother.
Yeah, he's trying to get him to come out of retirement
Yeah.
and clean up Dirty Berg.
Of course, the first person that he's sort of directed to go and see is Mr. Kalinga, the somewhat down on his luck
Yeah.
resistance fighter.
Well, Kalinga is a brilliant character. And as I was saying earlier about the way that this film acts as sort of a time capsule in between the early sort of murmurings of the Black Power movement and where it had got to in the late 1980s, Kalinga is a perfect example of that. He's sort of stuck in a black revolutionary past where all of his soldiers, all of his disciples, have gone off and got government jobs because they went down to take over the building and they were hiring that day. God.
The brothers walked in with guns and came out with jobs.
Came out with jobs. Yeah. And of course, now the Black Revolutionary headquarters has become essentially the Brady Bunch because he's got his white wife,
Yeah.
who's got her hair in braids, and they're, two white children. And actually, it's the woman who plays his wife was one of the children in the Brady Bunch.
Oh, really? Okay.
And the Brady Bunch theme tune plays as Junior gives his report on Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, Abraham Lincoln. Well, I've got it written down here. White capitalist swine. And then he kept on exploiting the black man until another piece of poor white trash shot him in the head. The end.
It's good when Kalinga sits in front. He sits in front of a big piece of work on the wall that says "Down with Whitey," and he spends his entire time with one black glove raised.
He eats nothing but beans. He drinks nothing but bean soda. Excellent spit take in that scene from the beans.
Yeah. Of course, his daughter was actually I recognised straight away as she was the girl from Jurassic Park.
When the first time I saw it, I went, "That's the girl from Jurassic Park," and it's unfortunate. I mean, we talk about typecasting. That's just one film role, and that's that.
Yeah.
All I don't know what she's done recently, but whatever it is, I guarantee as soon as she walked on stage or on set, everyone went, "It's the girl from Jurassic Park." It's a shame that the boy wasn't also the boy from Jurassic Park, because that would have been an absolute killer. I looked it up. He wasn't in Jurassic Park. He was in Ed Wood as Angry Youth.
Oh, well, that's the role we all wanted.
He was pretty angry in this, actually.
Yeah.
Because of Whitey.
He's been schooled well by stepdad, dad.
Presumably, that's never addressed, and that's one of the great unanswered questions in this film.
After this, sort of Jack goes on his way and carries on his lone angel citizen inquiry. Goes to see Cheryl in the diner, and two more of Mr. Big's goons turn up.
It's one of the goons that we saw at the beginning of the film, telling the police to desist in their inquiries into their John Doe's dive OG. quite the scene develops. I mean, Jack obviously is feeling tough and then feeling not quite so tough when he sees how tall one of the goons is. And then, of course, Mrs. Spade saves the day with some pretty neat ninja moves.
It was a scene that reminded me of Spaceballs with the stunt double.
Yes, the obvious stunt double. How can we make it more? How can we make it more obvious that the stunt double is a middle-aged white man? Give him a moustache. Stick a moustache on him.
But this is another recurring theme where, and it's something at this time that we don't realise because Jack's come back from the army. No one, or everyone assumes that he's off doing some sort of active service. Later on, we realise he's a glorified paper counter.
Intermilitary administration
admin
secretary.
So of course his mum turns up and fights all his battles for him, but she's pretty tough cookie.
Well, the thing is, this is one of the key issues. As when they go home in the next scene, Jack tears his mum off a strip, saying, "Listen, you don't have to fight my battles for me. I've been in the army, I've been to war," and she tears a strip back off him. I mean, she is a spunky character, Ma Bell, and
feisty.
When she's just excoriating him for what a little pussy he was when he was a kid. And okay, when that little Lois Mitchell was trying to kiss you, and when that family of midgets were beating you up, and I could hear your punk ass calling. That, she gives as good as she gets. It's a brilliant example, again, I think, of how this film is concise and it's breezy. Just, it tells you everything you need to know. Character is exposed in the most beautiful, funny, and simple way. And that's how you get your films under 90 minutes, future directors.
There's very little filler here. Because
there's no filler.
There's no need for exposition too much, because even in this part, when they've gone home from the diner, John turns up and he has the meeting with Ma the first time in many years. Yeah.
Jack has decided to go to war, and he turns up at the most appropriate moment. Because, of course, the immortal line, I'm so glad you're here, I really need you. And his reply, I've been pretty horny myself lately. Oh, dear.
He thought it was a booty call.
He did. But he takes it in good stead and ends up in a gunfight in the street, of course, with Jack.
Yeah.
Which is a fantastic piece of misdirection in a way, because you're quite tense during that scene because they're finally being attacked. And Jack, although he's been trained for combat, as he says, he ain't ever been in it. And then once you cut to the roof where the gunshot's coming from and realise that the shooters are Willie and Lenny, it completely changes the scene. Because you know that Willie and Lenny couldn't hit a cow's ass with a banjo. So all of a sudden, the heroes of your film are safe again. And that's, I think, a really neat piece of direction.
And the fact that it's the very comedic, over-the-top running around from Jack, he's clearly showing that, yes, he's trained for combat, but really John comes to his rescue.
As soon as the gunshots start firing, he's dancing on the spot going, they shooting. Which is how I... Yeah,
he starts showing off his back.
I think that's how I would deal with that situation. Whereas, of course, John Slade... uses a man who's been killed in the crossfire as a human shield to help, get them both across the street and up into the building.
He's showing his experience because it turned out that the man was ready to propose to his girlfriend.
Yeah, it's a sad day. It was a sad day, but we soon forget about. It was one of the other few white characters in this film. And unlike Mr. Big, who was having a great old time, this one wasn't having. He was a bit down on his luck. Well, He
Yeah.
didn't realise he was down on his luck until we met him.
Despite getting shot up, he then got ran on by Jack as well as they crossed the street.
Yeah, this is true. And the always welcome little fart noise, the Foley fart noise people were in effect.
Well, they get up onto the roof and we see Willie and Lenny just like two idiots trying their best. They've found this gun from wherever and doing their absolute worst to do their job.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long for John and Jack to overpower them.
No, I mean, Willie and Lenny are possibly the least effective hoods I've ever seen anywhere. I mean, even the hoods in Scooby-Doo are better than Willie and Lenny. But Willie and Lenny do have this sort of elderly married couple relationship where they bicker at each other, and there's a sort of hierarchy between them. It's almost touching, and it's touching because they're so ineffectual. And again, they end up getting chucked down the stairs, this time by Slade and Spade.
I love the fact that Willie, even though he's trying to be incognito with his balaclava, still has his somewhat conspicuous Kangol bucket hat on.
He does. And then, obviously, John says he's going to let them go. He's in a good mood. He's going to let them go. They why? Stop! What are you asking why for? What a beautiful little vignette of a relationship Willie and Lenny's is. I know lots of people who I would probably get involved in that kind of marital bickering with at key moments, like having a gun pointed at me on a roof.
Yeah, we'll take the stairs. After this, John says to Jack, we need to go and get ourselves some guns. So they head off to the little nightclub where
Yes. Yeah. Going to meet One-Eyed Sam, the sort of Slade's ex-military contact.
Yeah, and we find he's the first of Slade's sort of old friends who have some very interesting histories.
Yeah, Slade's got a real motley crew.
Yeah,
I mean, wow. And One-Eyed Sam is a great star. I love the scene at the nightclub because of the discussion about being loved and being laid.
Yeah.
And then Jack getting palmed off onto the predatory woman who sat at the bar in leather. She is fearsome. And the absolute best bit of the film, and if I am looking away for whatever reason and miss it, I have to spool back and watch it again. The best part of the film is Bernie Casey's look off her line when she's describing what it is that she's looking for in a perfect man, and she says 12 inches. His look off that is absolutely priceless.
Oh,
it's fantastic. It's sort of sharp exhalation of breath. That whole scene is so funny. Jack Spade is a brilliant, useless lump of a man. But the whole film is like that. And he's basically trying to establish himself as the great blaxploitation hero, but doesn't really know what he's doing. And what we find throughout the film is that he's the whole area that the whole any ghetto USA is populated by people who are in exactly the same boat. They're trying to be that person in that blaxploitation film, but they're grossly underqualified for the role. And
that's why John, I suppose, is the role model.
Yes.
And there is a very much a father-son relationship between them.
There is. I think John is the only character with any real competence in the film, apart obviously from Mama, who is so badass. Yeah. But I mean, Cherry is a fine example of someone who's trying to occupy a role within this, stereotypically blaxploitation world, but she's woefully underqualified. And I think the film, the scene that people who've not seen I'm Going to Get You Sucker will find on YouTube if they go and look will probably be the scene where Jack goes back to Cherry, the fearsome woman at the bar's apartment round the corner, and he reveals that he doesn't have a 12-inch penis, and she reveals by compensation that her eyes aren't really green and she's as bald as a coot and she's got fake tits and
It's the biggest game of Call My Bluff ever.
I love the way that they're giving that sort of thing equivalency for a start, but also when she takes that wig off, and if you've never seen it before, it is so unexpected and so funny. What a gut punch that is to you thinking, where's this scene going? And all of a sudden, oh, that's right, she is just half a human body, basically.
That was one of the bits I remember from the trailer when I watched it.
Yeah.
Was just that sort of little shriek she gives as she takes her wig off. Oh!
It's an absolute killer.
It is brilliant, and this is all. It doesn't progress the plot a huge amount, but it's just so funny while they're waiting for One-Eyed Sam, and it just goes to show again the difference between the sort of the elder statesman of the area in John and Jack, this very timid man with a army shorthand badge stitched onto his brand new leather jacket.
Yeah, I read somewhere that it blaxploitation films and the Black Power movement were all about self-determination. Black people being able to point out what they want and take it for themselves and not being have to be given anything. That's the self-determination, and that's what I think he's aiming for. I think Slade represents where he's aiming for, and then Jack represents where he is, whether that's drinking a Pepsi in the bar instead of a whiskey, or
double Pepsi,
literally running away from a one-legged bald woman, or comparing army secretary badges with One-Eyed Sam. He is a continual source of inspiration for all of us who've wanted to be heroes in the past.
Cutting to the scene you just mentioned with One-Eyed Sam, where they're talking about their army credentials, and it is good to meet you, son. I was into military administrator myself.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's John's face. He's like, "Oh no, you told me you served in Nam." He said, "I did. I was Saigon," and he lost it. He's lost his eye to fucking around in the office shooting paper clips.
Yeah, paperclip fight. And then, as Jack says, that nearly happened to him. So there's some pretty gnarly war experiences all around.
How did you get that medal? This one's for typing. This one's for surfing.
This one's for shorthand. Oh, I've got that one.
And for the supposed arms dealer, Sam does have a cache of weapons.
Yeah, it's rather sad.
They're old, old and in a bit of a state of disrepair, but he does assure them that once they're cleaned and all, they'll work.
Yeah, I think again, it's a film. It's about the passage of time, and I think again they're saying that a lot of time has passed since Slade was in his pomp, and all of this stuff was what the ghetto needed. And now that the ghetto needs it again, everything's got a bit flaky and a bit sad around the edges.
And even in Jack's bedroom, which you come back to, he's still got his old posters of Muhammad Ali and basketball players and his old heroes. One of the scenes that I watched when I rewatched the film last week, and I suddenly realised that I'd seen it so many times on YouTube and hadn't quite clicked. Because John's gone to get his army, he has gone to a rib shack, which is run by his old mates, Hammer and Slammer.
Yeah.
Now, Hammer is Isaac Hayes.
Yes.
Slammer is Jim Brown, who talked about on the Running Man podcast. He was Fireball in Running Man.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're two they are two legends of the Black Power movement. Who better to have in your blaxploitation film than Isaac Hayes and Jim Brown?
And a young Chris Rock makes an early career appearance.
Yeah, before he got his teeth all fixed and he became the world's leading stand-up comedian. There he was. Yeah.
Haggling over ribs and a handful of soda.
May I help you, sir?
How much for an order of ribs?
$2.50.
$2.50? How many ribs do I get with that?
About 5.
5? So I guess that's about 50 cents a rib, huh?
Yeah, about.
Let me get one.
Right on. One order ribs.
No. One rib.
One rib.
I sure am hungry.
Make that one rib to go.
One rib?
One rib. What else?
You got any soda?
$1.
Oh, come on now. Look out for a brother, man. Come on. Hey, check this out. Why don't you let me get a sip for 15 cents?
My cups cost more than 15 cents.
All right, fuck the cup. Pour it in my hand for a dime.
Look, you greasy-headed Jerry Curl Wan. Pay me and get the hell out of my store.
You got change for 100?
Look, we're gonna need an orthopedic surgeon to remove my foot from your ass.
Hammer.
No, brother, don't do it. You know the customer is always king. Hammer!
I think whenever I say to anywhere or to anyone how much I love I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, that is the line that comes back at you from people who've seen it. Is one rib. One rib. He's a fantastic. It's a brilliant little cameo. They're trying to haggle to get one rib, and I'll pay you 10 cents to drink some soda out of my cupped hands. And then he pulls out a massive wad of bills. I always forget how fat his wad is. He pulls 100 from the bottom of it and asks whether or not he can have any change. Isaac Hayes, I think, is comfortably the worst actor in that film. But he seems a little bit ill at ease. But I think it adds to the film in a way, because obviously blaxploitation films originally weren't the most immaculately acted things. And actually, as soon as you get past him trying to berate Chris Rock, which I suspect was probably him trying not to laugh, as soon as you get past that, actually, his role as a bit of a psychopathic enforcer, he plays it very well.
He does, and once you kind of turn that part of your brain off that he was Chef from South Park as well, it's...
the thing with Isaac Hayes is you don't really ever get past the fact that you're going, shit, it's Isaac Hayes. And I think that this film probably does it best because it gives him a really punchy name. Hammer and Slammer, easy to remember.
That's not a bad set of names for a double act, is it?
Absolutely not, no. But obviously, Hammer and Slammer, they're the first members of the crew. The scene after that meets up with Fly Guy.
Yeah.
The pimp. Now, obviously, I didn't know a lot about... I've not seen a great deal of blaxploitation films. I know this is a great spoof of blaxploitation films, but I've not seen a lot of blaxploitation films, in a way, because I've seen this, which is all of them at once. But I did know about Antonio Vargas when I first saw this film. And the fact that he was playing a pimp, and the most outrageous pimp in film history, with a fish in his shoes and I don't know how wide the brim, like 4 foot wide brim on his hat. Reminiscing.
The glass in the shoe.
Yes.
The fish in the shoes is one of the things I remember most again from the early days.
The thing that I always love from the meeting with Fly Guy is Pimp of the Year. The reminiscence of Pimp of the Year. The idea that there was a show to decide the Pimp of the Year. And when we get to see his talent and he recites his poem, "My bitch better have my money," it's just it just keeps leveling up. It's a scene that just keeps leveling itself up.
Because he delivers it with a bit of malice, doesn't he?
He means it.
Almost, you can see.
You sort of forgive him the actual malice in the poem because he's so physically non-imposing and ludicrous.
In the pink suit.
Yeah, but I mean, let's face it, he was Pimp of the Year.
I want to dedicate this to all you players and all you ladies.
All you ladies out there, yeah.
The thing is something I normally do on the podcast is at the end I end with whatever song was number one when the film was released in the UK. Now, this didn't get a cinema release in the UK, so what I was going to do was play the audio from a scene. Now, the difficulty I'm having is which one do I use? Because I was torn between Chris Rock and the Rib or the Pimp of the Year poem.
The Pimp of the Year poem would always get my vote in anything. Yeah. It might, I mean, if I got hold of that as an MP3, it would probably become my ringtone.
I think I can sort that out for you.
Yeah, Pimp of the Year. But actually, in terms of audio, the soundtrack of this film is fantastic. You've got John Slade walks around with his theme music because every good hero's got to have theme music. And they play the theme from Shaft. There's some great original songs written for it. And Jack gets his own theme music at the end, which is rap rather than soul.
Yeah, I suppose that's the new era that they're walking into.
It's, yeah, absolutely.
Well, once they've managed, because they've had to they've had to get Fly Guy out of prison in order to join the army.
Yeah.
And the fact that Fly Guy comes out of prison with these fish in his shoes, which last about 10 seconds.
It's It's in a way the passage of the last 10 years is represented in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Where originally people are going, wow, look at that. And then about 5 seconds in, they're starting to take the piss. By the end of 10 seconds, one of his shoes has broken and everyone's just rolling around on the floor laughing at how stupid he looks.
This inspired almost Austin Powers in a way where it was that, to use Fly Guy's fish, a fish out of water thing where he comes, Austin Powers goes 30 years forward in time. He thinks he's cool and everyone in Vegas laughs. And this is exactly what happened to Fly Guy.
It's a tragic realization for Fly Guy. Yeah. In fact, it's such a dressing down that when he appears later on in the film, it almost adds to the surprise because you go, oh yeah, Fly Guy. I thought he would have been destroyed by that.
Yeah,
he would have rolled up into a ball and was never seen again. So it just shows he had strength of character, which probably came from being Pimp of the Year.
Yeah. I suppose you'd need to be to stand up in front of a jury of your peers and read out, "My bitch better have my money."
Yeah, it is a jury of his peers.
Yeah. Once the gang are all together, Kung Fu Steve makes an appearance too.
Yeah. Oh, Kung Fu Joe is a man. Yeah, he's played by Steve James. He was a big Kung Fu stunt man. Big name in all kinds of films. I think that one thing that must have run through blaxploitation films, as I say, I haven't really seen him, must have been the old karate, kung fu, jiu-jitsu, and all kinds of shit, as Kung Fu Joe later says, that you ain't ever heard of. But he's ripped. He's got a picture of Bruce Lee around his neck, and in the scene after where they all meet up, where they're trying to disrupt Mr. Big's businesses by taking down the nightclub, I noticed today that while they're all shooting out the bar, he's throwing shuriken at the bar. He's so kung fu that he won't even use a gun.
This is at the Big Brim bar where Everyone's
Yeah.
seen that. We thought Fly Guy's hats were large. These are essentially sombreros on speed.
They're enormous.
Yeah.
But they're enormous for a reason, because, of course, it's revealed that each one contains a midget from the of the same family of midgets who chastised Jack as a youth. Which shows this thing goes deep, doesn't it?
As we can see, once they realise, and these short guys start crawling out of these enormous, oversized hats, and then Jack starts fighting a midget.
Jack loses his mind.
It's crazy, really. You forget just how silly this film is, but there isn't a wasted line, because that.
This is true. Yeah. There's no wasted line. There's no wasted character. Even the smallest role has something. They'll either have a look or a line or a gag or something that will make you laugh. It's just, there's so much meat on those bones.
And a funny bit, as they go upstairs at the Big Brim bar, and there's a brothel upstairs which Mr. Big's using to make a lot of his money, and I suppose that's where Cheryl's destined to go. I guess
so, yeah.
Yeah, and as they're kicking the doors down, there's the lady with another model turned actress on her back, and Jack decides he sees all these women in not very much clothing, and he has to get himself a little bit of that. Has to be pulled back from the brim. We go back to Cheryl. She's working at the diner still, and things aren't going particularly well. She seems quite stressed. She has to leave a little bit early. And she's accosted by Lenny outside. And this was a bit that almost confused me, because this is where it almost borders on some sort of supernatural bit that, again, I remembered from the trailer as a kid. Because he grabs her as she's walking down the street, trying to, basically, I suppose, trying to rape her, really, isn't he? Let's be brutally honest.
Well, he's trying to steal her away. I mean, it's a brutal world that Mr. Big is running. So, yeah, I guess so.
Now, she turns around and her eyes are lit up and everything. And he says, "Oh, you must have the devil in you." And now this is something I never quite got. Was it, she said, "No crabs" or "no cramps"? I couldn't quite remember.
What she's saying is that she's got cramps.
Yeah.
She's got menstrual cramps.
Yeah.
Now, there's not a lot of films that have ever dealt with it, I think, before that.
No.
And in America, they were very, very abstemious. And I know that Courtney Cox was the first woman to say period on American television in an advert. And, Courtney Cox isn't that old.
No.
So this film must be about contemporaneous with that. And I think it's a hugely bold thing to do. It's quite woke, I think. But then again, I'm a middle-aged white man, and I could be wrong.
But we all sympathise where she throws Lenny against the wall and says, "I'm going to rip your balls off."
Yeah.
So I suppose it probably is cramps then.
It probably was cramps, but I mean, as I was whistling for you. You were whistling, "Help, help, get this bitch off me," is the line when his partner in crime comes to the rescue.
Again, it's him coming to the rescue, but cutting to Mr. Big, and he's still trying to get his plan moving. Kung Fu Joe is stopped by the police.
Yeah, Mr. Big's in deep with the police, isn't he? He gets the police to ostensibly pull Kung Fu Joe over for the crime of driving a nice car and being black.
Yeah.
And that's a scene. It's quite a small scene, but it's absolutely packed with lines and moments. You've got the automated voice reminding you to shut the door that gets more and more irate with you.
Shut the door, dickhead.
You've got him standing in the middle of that circle of police officers going, "Oh, I'm going to kick some ass now." And then the immortal line, So, just you 57 punks against Kung Fu Joe.
Yeah, and of course, the next shot is they're all unloading their guns on him.
Yeah, absolutely shot to bits.
Hammer and Slammer get accosted by
It's Willie and Lenny again.
yeah. So they get grabbed in a car park. Slammer has a gun that rivals Dirty Harry's, I think.
Absolutely.
But they run off, and this is where it's all sort of coming to a head, I suppose.
Yeah, we're building to the big showdown.
Yeah.
Slade has given Big 24 hours to get out of town. Big's pushed back, so now it's come to this, and it's basically from that point onwards, everything is descending on that warehouse confrontation, isn't it?
Yeah, because they've kidnapped Lenny. Or was it Willie? It was Willie.
I think it's Willie, yeah. They've kidnapped Willie, who is Mr. Big's nephew.
Yeah.
Possibly by the same logic that those were the children of Kalinga in the earlier scene. They've kidnapped Willie. Obviously, Mr. Big have got Cheryl. And Willie's spilling the beans. I think not necessarily on purpose or because of anything other than that he's quite stupid.
Yeah.
And he's told them where the warehouse is. They tool up and they head out.
And when they tool up, Hammer takes about 5 minutes.
Yeah, every pocket is packed with ordnance. When I first saw that, I thought I might die of laughter. When he struts out of that warehouse and treads on the bullet and goes over onto his back and all the guns go off. It was like a Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoon.
But this is something I joked about in one of the earlier episodes I did with Terry about Commando, where one of the iconic scenes from that film is Schwarzenegger getting ready to invade this island on his own, and he's got guns, knives, claymores, grenades. This is Isaac Hayes in a oversized military coat trying to shovel these tiny little guns into the pockets, and he barely gets out the door.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's the absolute apex of all of those moments. It's brilliant.
I mean, it's not even a parody of blaxploitation at this point. This is a parody of generally any action film from that era.
Yeah, I think all films, yes.
But once, already, we're one man down. Just his face while these guns are going off.
Yeah, and then one's going between his legs.
And it's not long after that, as they're trying to get into the building, that John meets.
Well, yeah, we lose a second man, and now this is the scene. This is, in a way, I think, is the initiation point of me doing this whole podcast. Was you mentioned that I'm going to get you Sucka on Twitter, and I believe that I said that every time I see this scene, I both shit and piss myself laughing, and it's not an exaggeration because every time I see it. I know, and now that I know what's going to happen, I still know what's going to happen. But it's still timed in such a way you think, well, there's going to be an extra bit. They wouldn't just do it then, would they?
Yeah.
And he rappels down the side of the building with the dynamite to go in through the window, and the dynamite goes off early. And all of the people who are sat in the room that he was going to try and go into just sort of look around as if to say, was that thunder? What was that? Oh, God.
And even then, while he's trying to abseil, the security guard that he disables has got a BMW medallion and a load of gold chains of his own. just to chuck in that he's also an addict.
Well, yeah, this is how he's got them, isn't he? He's Whitey. Whitey is something else. That's Kalinga pointed out. Yeah. We've lost Slade, we've lost Hammer, and then Slammer gets laid up fairly quickly because he wanted to go in through the window. He never gets to go in through the window. And he jumps through that window like a sack of spuds. And then promptly his bunions on his feet get caught in the crossfire with Mr. Big's goons. The scene where his toe is just bulging out of his shoe. There's one final look at the thing, just to emphasise it. They give it sort of full inflation.
Yeah.
God, again, it's another brilliant little moment that you just go, "This is fantastic."
But this is one of those things that, having seen it as a kid, every time, and it's not something I come across very often, I'm not a chiropodist, but whenever you come across the word bunion, this is what I think of.
Yeah.
I just think, when I told my brother about this film, my brother's a year younger than me, we watched it at the same time, and all he could say at the time was, "They shot me in a bunion. You step on my bunion, I kill both of you."
Yeah. Well, I mean, I still don't even really know what a bunion is, but if it's anything like that,
that looked like something at a Little Shop of Horrors or Gremlins or something.
The prosthetic throbbing toe effect is.
But while Slammer is down bemoaning his sore toe, Mama turns up again.
She's not going to let anyone hurt her baby, and she retains true. She remains true to her values throughout the film. Turns up, I think she's got like a Bren gun or something.
Yeah,
but Jack this time is so appalled that he's not going to be able to be the man in control of his own destiny, that he locks her in a cupboard from whence she screams the place down.
And even then, he gets. Again, it's something like one of the shooting bit from Pulp Fiction. They manage to shoot all around him, but not actually get one in him.
Yeah, there's a very similar scene to that in another one of my favourite. I mean, I know this doesn't necessarily paint me as a culture vulture, but, it is what it is. Another one of my favourite films, Ali G Into House, which is a film that people say to me, "What is it about that film that you like so much?" And I say, "It's funny. It's just funny. You either laugh or you don't, I suppose, but it makes me laugh." And there's a very similar scene to that at the beginning of that film, where the bullets make a perfect outline of him. Only, of course, in Ali G Into House, it makes a perfect outline of him with a huge dong. This one's a little bit more restrained, and I think a little bit more respectful of the generic roots of doing that.
No hero can go through a film like this untarnished. No. Jack hurts his finger, and it's a harrowing scene, like something out of where Predator has to heal himself. He screams. He is
incurred a splinter, I think, by all accounts, and has to use most of his intermilitary administration nous to properly heal it up. I like the fact that he heats the pin up first, just to sterilise it.
He starts heading up to where Cheryl is. He's in the warehouse. His gun's empty. This is when he has to think a little bit, because he hears Cheryl, but he's got what any good administrator has: paper clips and an elastic band.
Of course, yes, absolutely.
He does get to have the confrontation, or he thinks he does anyway, with Lenny at least to start with.
Yeah, he's got him cornered.
Yeah.
Cheryl does her best, bless her, to warn the bloody idiot. But unfortunately, he was not on his own. Lenny sneaks out behind him with a huge gun, and he's only saved by the emergence of Fly Guy, who, as I said, we've all forgotten about Fly Guy because his capitulation as a human being was so total. But there he is.
But he comes back a different person. He's restrained. He's in a fairly sensible suit.
He's in a suit that says, "I'm a mature man, but I am also still a badass pimp." And it got an exceptionally small, sawn-off handgun. Comes into the strains of his own theme music, Curtis Mayfield. You just think, well, what an entrance that is. Top that.
And yet Mr. Pick comes in saying, justifying his role as a white guy in this film, saying there ain't going to be no sequel to this.
There's lots of
it's breaking the
lots of famous white actors have played exploitation films. It does it continually. That I think it's very good at sort of breaking that fourth wall, and with a nod and a wink throughout, saying, we know what we're doing here. We know how silly this is. Don't you forget it.
But the film ends. It's not a long, drawn out ending. There's no Samuel L. Jackson in an eye patch to try and tie this into some grander thing.
No. As soon as Mr. Big is out and justifying his role, he's been captured, basically, isn't he? Well, don't take him alive.
Yeah. In front of a huge giant medallion with Mr. Big on.
With Mr. Big on it, yeah. John Slade pops up, still smoking, still smouldering, and shoots him dead and says, "I got you, sucker," which obviously has to be done.
Cool.
But it does lead to the greatest unanswered question in this film, which is, did he blow himself up on purpose? Because everything else he's done has been so, meticulously planned and brilliantly thought out and wonderfully conceptualized that I can only think that he did it to throw them off the scent, to make them think that he wasn't still there.
It was a giant diversion.
And it was a huge diversion. And I just think that that's a very risky thing to do.
Especially with dynamite.
Especially with dynamite, yes. Absolutely.
And as you mentioned earlier on, the film closes to Jack's theme music. It's a rap. I'm not even going to pretend I know anything about it. But
KRS-One.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But this is it.
So, quite a big artist at the time.
Okay. And I mean, this shows, I suppose, the circle is complete. Jack is now the hero with his theme music.
Yes, absolutely.
But Mr. Big, I guess, was right. And certainly 30 years later, my God, 30 years, we still haven't had a sequel.
We still haven't had a sequel. And given what films have come since from the Wayans stable, maybe that's a good thing. But I've always said, give me a one-hit wonder any time, because you show me a one-hit wonder and I'll show you someone who has made a genuinely brilliant pop song. You show me someone who's made one brilliant film and I'll show you someone who's, that's an artist. You can make as many bad films as you like after this one, as far as I'm concerned. Because this film, for me, is as good as any spoof that was made in the 1980s. Yeah. And it is funny. It is so funny. I can't imagine someone not enjoying it, although I do know that people don't enjoy it as much as me because I've met my wife.
I showed my wife the trailer and she just went, Jesus.
Maybe it's a boys' film.
Maybe.
I would love to meet women who got as much out of this film. Maybe I would be able to find out whether or not it is woke to do a joke about menstrual cramps, or whether or not it's grossly offensive.
It's pioneering in its way.
It was certainly pioneering. I don't know if it was pioneering in a way which is now to be celebrated. It's a bit like the character of Apu in The Simpsons. It's pioneering, but now, I don't know. Should we have said that?
I guess this is the thing. We're looking back at this with different eyes. But then 1988, I suppose The Simpsons were just started, hadn't they? Or were just about to.
Yeah, I guess so.
So Apu wouldn't have been too far away, and yet has Apu aged as well as this film? It appears not.
Definitely not. This film has, and I don't know if this is a function of being old and being able to remember those times, but when I was 8 when that film came out. Or nearly 8. If I think back to what films were 30 years old when I was 8, you're looking at films like North by Northwest and things like that.
Yeah.
They felt like a completely different thing. This thing still feels current to me. I mean, obviously it's got a bit of an 80s sheen to it, and the cars are delightfully 1980s and all this. But I think a lot of the themes that it explores are still very current, and I think it deals with them in a very current way.
As a little treat, because I guess we must be a very similar age, because I'm 38 at the time of recording. 1958, the big films of that year: Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
Okay.
Yeah, this
Nice.
is the sort that we're talking of here. Gigi, Touch of Evil.
Great film.
South Pacific. Now, it's hard to look back at those and say, if podcasts were the thing in the late 80s, would people have been looking back ironically at those? I don't know.
Yeah.
The Blob, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so. I suppose.
But even now, I suppose there was Carry On films had just started.
Yeah,
then as well.
I think the thing is that people who would have remembered those films and when they were 8, if they were 8 when those films came out, would probably look at them differently again and go, well, I remember that. Isn't that what life's like? I'm still a bit like that with all kinds of films from the 1980s, and it's because I'm from the 1980s, and there's nothing can take that away. No amount of therapy can take the fact that I am a creature of the 1980s away from me.
I think it gets to almost every other podcast when I talk about when I was a kid and my dad would be watching some old John Wayne film or Clint Eastwood, and I'd be, oh my God, this is so boring. And he said, when you're my age, you'll be watching Star Wars and Superman, and your kids will be saying they're boring. Now, my kids aren't old enough to talk properly yet, but
it's coming.
I know exactly what they're going to say.
Yeah,
it's coming.
That slow train be coming, yeah.
Although I have been, in the recent years, been trying to go through and watch some of the old Eastwood and John Wayne films just to see what my dad was talking about, and they're actually very entertaining.
Oh, there you go. I've never revisited John Wayne. My grandfather used to love a John Wayne, and I was deeply suspicious.
Again, a different time.
Oh, very much, yes.
Well, Ed, thank you very much for suggesting this film. It was an absolute treat to watch it again.
I will recommend this film to anyone and everyone. Watch the film.
At the time of recording, so we're saying at the end of April 2018, this film is on Netflix. It's in high definition. Watch it.
It's in your home.
Yeah.
It's there. It's sat in your TV. What are you doing listening to this? Watch the film.
People are watching TV shows. They've got House of Cards and Narcos and all this stuff. But explore Netflix back catalogue. You will find this film. I will warn you, you may also get recommended the Joseph Fritzl documentary. I want to know what they suggest if it goes the other way if you watch the Fritzl film. But this film is well worth your time.
I'm pretty sure that there couldn't be anything more different to the film I'm Going to Get You Sucker than a documentary about an Austrian lunatic.
Well, unless I don't know. Unless I'm Going to Get You Sucker was a favourite of his that he used to play in his dungeon.
Or maybe. But if I tell you, if he was playing that in his dungeon, he wasn't as bad as it's been made out, because that is a quality film.
That Austrian lunatic must have had some good ideas.
Yeah. It wasn't all misjudgments.
Not like the poster on the tube I saw not long after his arrest, where it said "Discover Austria's hidden treasures."
The trouble is, people who keep their children locked up in the basement don't consult enough with tourist boards, marketing agencies, and that's the take home. Is that they should do that more often, and that sort of thing can be avoided. That
would have spared the farce that was the supposed sequel to Crocodile Dundee that turned out to be a large advert for the Australian marketing tourist board. People were disappointed. Moving on. Ed, where can people find you, and what is it that you can provide people when they look for you on social media?
Your best bet is to look for me on Twitter or on Instagram, where I am at Dotmund, and they can find what I would describe as art and hot takes, and occasional podcast services.
Well, your 200% podcast with Ian, that's on a bit of a hiatus at the moment. Are there any plans to bring that back?
We are trying, and we've got other podcasts. Every time I see Ian now, he's got an idea for a new podcast. So we've now got about 3 or 4 podcasts that are currently on hiatus. But that's the only one that we've got that we've started. So, yeah, hopefully we will be back. And in fact, if we come back with all of our ideas, you really will be sick of the sight and sound of us.
Well, and we've also arranged that you'll be back when we get round to covering Beverly Hills Cop 2. So another treat for everyone.
Another film that I watch and then think, isn't the world still like that? Is this dated? Have I grown old?
Yes, well, this is why we have to research about Eddie Murphy in history class. Well, as we discussed earlier, there wasn't a number one when this came out because it didn't come out in the cinemas in the UK. So I will play it out with Fly Guy's recital of My Bitch Better Have My Money. Ed, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we look forward to speaking again soon.
I'm gonna try to do a little poetry for y'all. It's an original piece written by me, Fly Guy. And I want to dedicate this piece to all you players and all you ladies out there. The name of this piece is called My Bitch Better Have My Money. My bitch better have my money. Through rain, sleet, or snow.
That was a Shakespeare.
My hoe better have my money.
I'm telling you, that boy's a genius. Tell it.
Not half, not some, but all my cash. Because if she don't, I'm gonna put my foot dead in her ass.
The Imp of the Year is Fly Guy.
This podcast is part of Britpod Scene, an independent network of uniquely British podcasts that's always growing. Check out BritpodScene.com or Britpod Scene on Twitter to find out more.